this is how people will engage with their energy moving forward, both from the residential side, but also the commercial and industrial side.
Hello, I'm Peter Asmus, Director of Strategic Marketing with AutoGrid, and today we have Avery McEvoy from RMI, and we're going to talk about virtual power plants. So, Avery, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and RMI to start with, a little background.
Great. Well, thanks, Peter. Thanks for having me. I'm Avery McEvoy. I'm a senior associate on the carbon-free electricity team at RMI. I've been at RMI for about 3.5 years, and I have a background in environmental engineering. But once I found energy, I knew that was my future. The grid is becoming more and more decentralized instead of just centralized power plants. So this topic of virtual power plants has come up, which it's nothing new. It's, these customer-sited and distributed energy assets, aggregating them together to serve functionally as a power plant. It's not virtual in the sense that it's not real. Everything's very real, but it's virtually a power plant when you're aggregating all of these devices together. So we saw a need for an organizing body to kind of convene folks and thought leadership and content around virtual power plants specifically. So that's why VP3 was created, January 10th, 2023. So just over a year this week.
Oh, wow. So it's the anniversary, essentially.
Yeah, Wednesday was our birthday.
Wow. Well, that's cool. I think it makes sense because I remember when I first heard about Amory Lovins, he used the word the soft path. This is decades ago. And at the time, I think it was pretty groundbreaking. And I remember seeing him speak where he was great, very articulate, like, we don't want electricity, we want cold beer. I remember that was one of his, he would just talk about the services at the end, and how we had to shift from polluting.
Yeah, but, cold beer and hot showers is what I learned in school. Yeah, in school from Amory, and what people still say at work all the time. So it's still very much part of RMI. While I think as people who work on this every day, we think about the barriers a lot because we want to enact change. I really do think there's a lot of promise that VPPs can bring to the future. I think my main takeaway is I absolutely think this is how people will engage with their energy moving forward, both from the residential side, but also the commercial and industrial side. As we have more and more grid connected, electrified devices and assets, those are loads that are coming online, whether people like it or not, right? Like if you add an EV, that can increase your home's load by 50%. And for utilities, when a new resource was coming online that was a power plant, they knew that for 5+ years that they had adequate time to plan for it. But now some pretty substantial loads are coming online in the blink of an eye. And if a whole neighborhood adopts EVs, that's a really material load on their distribution system and some supply that they will need to plan for. Or alternatively, what they could do is just utilize the devices that are already in people's homes, businesses, able to flex that demand, able to inject power and energy back into the grid, ancillary services. So VPPs offer this solution of how to handle all of the electrification that's coming online, which is what we want, but we want to be able to manage it. And also buy time to build out the necessary infrastructure upgrades we need. We need transmission, we need distribution, we need the upgrades to those different elements of the infrastructure of the power grid in order for it to all work as harmoniously as it has in the past as we enter, the era of increasingly extreme weather events and unpredictability. So I think VPPs will happen because people are buying these devices. And if they can adopt these devices and get paid for letting them be used for a very short amount of time within certain parameters, then everyone will be better off for it. People need resilience moving into this future. I think that's the main thing. You started touching on that. You can support your local grid. You can support your community. If it faces an extreme weather event, like you mentioned, it can help support the grid and weather that storm. And I think as long as we can make sure VPPs access all different customer types, especially energy burdened communities that can benefit from it most, then I'm excited to see where the market goes this year, because as we need to increase access to VPPs, we need to scale them, and that includes being inclusive to all communities.
So what are some of the barriers? And I would imagine that's probably what your group is sort of focused on, at least in part.
Yeah, so I think what we're seeing in the clean energy transition in general is that we have a lot of technological solutions right now, and a lot of the barriers are within the implementation of them or the rollout of them. So for virtual power plants, they build on the foundational principles of, demand response, energy efficiency, demand side management, demand flexibility, all of these terms that are very familiar and have been around, but now they're being packaged into this virtual power plant aggregation. And I think related to the inherent nature of aggregating all of these different types of devices and assets and different ways of delivering either energy or demand flexibility, you have barriers related to that. So I think the first barrier is valuation. So VPPs are typically undervalued in utility planning and retail programs. So an example here is that an electric vehicle can be placed into a traditional demand response peak shaving program, trying to reduce the peak when there's a lot of ramp rates when people come home and turn on all of their lights or want to plug in their car coming home from work. But that actually fails to capture the entire suite of benefits that EVs could have and the grid services. For example, like injectability, dispatching that energy or doing energy arbitrage, that wouldn't necessarily be captured by just a traditional program. So these old paradigms of how utilities and regulators have thought to categorize these different assets that might not necessarily capture the full value yet. From the perspective of like regulators and utilities as well, they have, certain regulatory frameworks or planning models that they have used for decades. Right. And when you have these newer technologies or technologies that aren't as new that you want to integrate, they need to figure out new ways to put those together, right? So that can be a barrier. You actually touched on the awareness element, which is one of my other barriers out of the three, stakeholder awareness. So key stakeholders are unaware of the economic, the social, and the environmental benefits of virtual power plants. This can either be the customer, right? Like as a residential customer, I know plenty of my friends are like, what is a virtual power plant? Where my brother was like, someone wants me to install solar and batteries in my home and enroll in a virtual power plant. And I was like, that's actually what I work on. He's like, oh, so the awareness of what they are and the benefits that they can provide to you, both from the utility perspective, it can reduce system costs, and both from the customer perspective, it can reduce your energy bill. The awareness of those benefits aren't as prevalent. Even if they are familiar concepts, I think virtual power plants is a hard concept to understand because it's such a jargony like industry term. So some people like the term distributed power plant, which helps illustrate that, oh, right, you have all these devices in your homes or your businesses, and you can put them together across thousands of them and be paid for letting someone use them for a very finite amount of time within really specific customer comfort barriers. So we've covered the first two, and I have one more. So one is valuation, two is stakeholder awareness, and then three is technology silos and fragmentation. So because these different programs have been developed over time, a utility can have a smart thermostat program, they can have a battery program, but virtual power plants, as I mentioned, they bring all of those together. And those different types of assets can deliver different types of grid services. And the programs might be structured in different ways. They might have different incentive structures based on the technologies. So we're seeing a barrier of these DER programs people are trying to go more towards a technology agnostic program that can, be inclusive of all these different types of technologies. But just like it's easier to build a new home, it's harder to retrofit a current home. So it's kind of like, if you have the opportunity to create a technology agnostic program, wonderful, or technology agnostic, great. But if you have these existing programs and then you want to marry them together, like that also involves like having the departments at the utility talk to each other a lot more, right? Like there's a very much a tangible need and movement of people and information that needs to happen with it too.